What is going on, everybody? It is Catching Feelings with John Sapanaro. Of course, this is broadcast across not only my Facebook page, but in concert with the Queens Baseball Convention on their Facebook page and, of course, their Twitter pages as well. So wherever you're joining us from, we appreciate you guys watching, tuning in. And we're talking all things Mets baseball as we usually do. And look, when you're talking Mets baseball, there's one place that you need to start, usually always over the last 3, 4, 5 years, but specifically this year, and that is with Jacob deGrom. And I don't like to start in the same place as I did in my last show, but if you guys watched it, you'd notice that we talked extensively about Jacob deGrom at the beginning, but after his last start, it's where we have to begin. I mean, the guy is otherworldly. My guest, Joe Prano, last week, we talked about how he's compared to peak Pedro, right? And how he can be that good. And is he that good? And where his all-time, where he's going to fall all time at this point, because there's no disputing. Jacob deGrom is the best pitcher in baseball today. But where is his place going to be once his career is over if he continues on this path? I mean, he's had now, basically 3 seasons. I know last year was short, but 2.5 seasons of complete and utter dominance. And he looks like he's on another planet right now. I mean, when you look at the guy's last start, okay, he went a complete game shutout, no walks, 15 strikeouts, that's a career high, 109 pitches, so pretty efficient. Okay, and he was blowing guys away. 2 hits. One of those hits was real great. It was Starlin Castro, who always puts together, great at bats. But I mean, the guy's scattering hits and making major league hitters look foolish. The guy is incredible. And it's mind-blowing to me as somebody who's watched his entire career. I'm a little young to have seen vintage Doc Gooden. Okay, I've seen it since I've gone back and watched clips. Okay, but as somebody born in 1986, I didn't get to witness it and watch it as it was unfolding. Okay, so when you have the opportunity to watch a guy like Jacob deGrom do what he's doing right now, it is absolutely insane. It is unfathomable. And I know as Met fans, we've had a taste of this before, right? Because we've had Harvey Day. We had R.A. Dickey when he went on his crazy run in that Cy Young year. But it was fleeting. It wasn't with this kind of consistency. What we're watching now is akin to some of the greatest pitchers in the history of baseball. I understand guys strike out a lot more now. So, you have to look at some of these numbers with a grain of salt and everything in its own context. I completely get that. But this guy is absolutely insane. And I just, every start is just appointment television. And you just have to tune in. You have to watch it. And you know that there's a chance that Jacob deGrom is going to do something absolutely special every time he gets on the mound for the Mets. So with that said, it's weird to start off in a positive place 2 shows in a row and we're talking about the Mets, but hopefully that's the trend all season. I'm going to bring in my guest this week. She's absolutely fantastic. She's a host personality. She's a Monster Jam announcer. She's a former New York Jets Flight Crew Cheerleader, and she is my co-host along with Max D'Antonucci on the goddamn Jets, which is another show we do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring in Kimberly Cantoni, lifelong Mets fan. Kim, I know you were backstage. You were listening to the rants and the raves that I had going on. I mean, when you watch Jacob deGrom, what is your feeling? Just as a Mets fan, what's the feeling that you get from this guy?
He is just absolutely amazing. And to your point, in my opinion, he's one of the most powerful players playing the game right now. He is just absolutely outstanding. And in terms of great pitching, I would compare him to Tom Seaver. He is up there as one of the greatest pitchers. And actually, because of this game, he lowered his career ERA to 2.55, which overtook Tom Seaver's record. So just seeing him on Friday was absolutely outstanding. Not only is he a great pitcher, he's a great hitter. And I love to see that with pitchers that can also hit the ball. That just shows a well-rounded baseball player. And I think we are lacking that a little bit just overall in the game of baseball. So I'm happy to see that he is talented on all facets of the game. But what an outstanding game on Friday. He really is amazing, and I think he can take the Mets to the postseason.
Yeah, it's crazy because, Ron Darling in the Mets booth always refers to, the kind of games. And look, nobody's had the kind of game that deGrom had the other day. I mean, it was otherworldly. We haven't seen that kind of performance, that domination in a while. Even with some of the no-hitters and stuff that have popped up, his stuff, he looked untouchable. But Darling usually refers to that as like a little league game where the pitcher comes out and he dominates on the mound, but he's also the best player that day. So he gets a couple hits, which deGrom did. He had 2 hits. He knocked in the Mets' first run, which is something something that he's been doing, because the Mets don't score for him ever. So
right. Exactly.
It's something that he's kind of been accustomed to doing, but he does that, right? So he goes out, he knocks in the first run, then he chips in a double. The guy is just, he's performing at a level that is just, to me, it is sort of incomprehensible, really. I mean, he has more RBIs this season than he has earned runs.
It's incredible for a pitcher. It's incredible. And I think Brandon Nimmo kind of summed it up best, saying he single-handedly won and changed the game. Now, to say that about a pitcher is pretty incredible, So just based on what he did and based on that, clearly he is respected amongst the players, amongst, his teammates and Mets fans alike. The fact that the Mets have DeGrom and have still been able to hold on to him is like a miracle in its own way, right? Because I feel like with the Mets too, we've dealt with some great times, we've dealt with some hardships, but just to be able to maintain him and to have his greatness, be a part of that, one of the greatest games he's ever pitched. And I think there's no stopping him. Are we going to see a no-hitter one day? Absolutely. Are we going to see 20 strikeouts? Absolutely. Just the fact that he is a Mets player and can take us to the next level, I think is just outstanding. We just need everybody else to kind of pick it up a little bit and kind of be on the same playing field as him.
If you guys are watching this, I know there's a few of you here. People tune in, tune out. That's always the case with the live stream. But right now, we're just gushing over Jacob deGrom. We'll get into some of the nitty-gritty of the Mets season so far. The series with the Nationals, the upcoming series that starts tomorrow against the Red Sox, who are a very surprising team in their own right. But right now, we're just talking about Jacob deGrom because how could you not? So throw in the comments, no matter where you're watching this, on the QBC page, on my page, wherever it is. We just want to know what you think about Jacob deGrom. Is it possible? We talked about this a little bit last week. Is it possible for him to get even better? And not the stuff. The stuff is otherworldly. When you start getting to the point where you're throwing a 99.3 mile an hour average fastball velocity, the stuff can't get better than that, right? He's got the highest average fastball velocity. He's got the highest average slider velocity, the second highest changeup velocity. The guy's stuff is it can't be any better than this. But in terms of the way that he can pitch, what he can do when he uses that stuff, my guest last week, Joe, talked about how, sometimes there's a comparison with pitchers of, what they do when they don't have their best stuff and how they grind it out, which is something deGrom's always done, even going back to the World Series run in 2015. But he said, what about when he puts it together where he does have his best stuff and he doesn't rely on that fastball for one batter too long like we saw against the Marlins, right? So he kind of, he threw two fastballs by Jazz Chisholm, and then next thing you know, in the third one, Jazz hits a home run, a moonshot. He got ready for it and he teed off. So I think that is the next level of what we're going to see from him, Kim, is when he's like, you know what? Okay, I've got this great fastball. I want to use it 73% of the time, but I've thrown it. I've beat you with it twice. Now I'm going to rip off this slider. I think that's the next level for deGrom.
And that just shows you what kind of a pitcher he is. He's a great pitcher. When you know that what you have and your skill sets, what's working for you and how you can change it up, even if it's in the slightest way, how you can still confuse the batters, and I think that is a skill in its own right that he has completely mastered. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. Thank God he's going to be pitching up against the Red Sox coming up. Because, thank God, right? So I'm just, there's a reason why over 8,000 fans that were there at the game on Friday were chanting MVP for deGrom, because he truly was the MVP. And he's just so talented as a pitcher. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, obviously, clearly he was the MVP of that game. And I think that's another way we can see, quote unquote, can he get better? We've seen a few instances of, a pitcher, and I know it's controversial because there's an award for the pitchers, got the Cy Young, right? But we've seen some instances where the pitcher wins the Cy Young and the MVP. And I think that's almost the next step that Jacob deGrom can take in his career, especially if, he wants to be a Hall of Famer, which is what he's talking about now. Because I think he realizes, the kind of trajectory that he's on. And how could you not? But it's funny because the guy is so unassuming. The guy is so go about his business. But then when you talk to him and they interview him, he's like, well, yeah, I'd like to be in the Hall of Fame. It's like, well, he's acknowledging the fact that he's doing something that is, is only measurable by Hall of Fame standards. And he sees that and he wants it. And, I appreciate a guy that says that and is honest with himself and honest with, the people asking the questions like, hey man, I'm going all in. Like, this is my career. I see where I've landed and I see what I need to do to get there. And that's what I'm focused on. And you know what? Personal goals in baseball is what gets your team to the next level. It's a team sport made of individual statistics. So, Jacob deGrom going for the gold every single time he's out there to try to get to the Hall of Fame is only beneficial to the Mets.
Absolutely. And like, to your point, I agree. That's the kind I want to see passion, from our athletes, especially from the team, and I think it's important to have personal goals. For myself, when I was on the flight crew, I too had personal goals. I wanted to be a group leader. I wanted to go to the Pro Bowl, and I achieved every single goal that I wanted to. And I think it's important too, when you are that good, that you realize that you can get better. I always say, if you have nothing to learn, then it's time for you to go. So the fact that he openly admits that he still can improve and still get better, even though he's right now great at what he does. But the fact that he has goals to go to the Hall of Fame, be better than he was the last game, and continuously have that kind of motivation and just manifest that into the universe, that's the kind of players I want to see on my team, whether it be the Mets or the Jets. That's what I want to see, because it tells me that you care. But also, too, there's nothing wrong with having personal goals, to get you to the next point of the game. I think so, too. I agree with him. I think he's a Hall of Famer. Without a doubt, he's a Hall of Famer. I can see the Mets retiring his number one day. I think he's going to be able to achieve all those accolades that he sets for himself.
Yeah, I mean, because he's the kind of guy that the work ethic never comes into question. Like Luis Rojas said it about him last week, because they skipped his turn in the rotation. And he just said, look, after Colorado, he just felt like he needed an extra day. They gave it to him. And he comes out and he throws arguably the best start of his career. And Luis Rojas said nobody knows his body better than Jacob deGrom. He's the kind of guy that when he says that, he's not begging off of a start, he's not BSing, he's not just like a little off. He's just like, hey, you know what? I need an extra day. I feel a little sore, or maybe he's a little lethargic. The air's thin up there in Coors Field. Ron Darling talked about it on the broadcast. Sometimes when you pitch in Colorado, you just you just feel sore longer. Everything is just kind of, it takes an extra day or two to recover. So he said that, and then he made good on it. And that's all Jacob deGrom has ever done. He says stuff and then he makes good on it every single time. And, for somebody who is so business approach, he's so, he's the kind of guy, like I said, he's non-assuming. He's not, he's not Harvey. He's not Syndergaard. He doesn't have that flash, but he does have this sort of quiet confidence. He is a bulldog on the mound. He wants to rip your heart out every time he takes the mound, but he doesn't do it with any kind of flash. He's just like, yeah, I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to, line up, and he's cover his face up a little bit. He's going to throw those pitches, but he does it in a way that is so calm, but that there's this fire behind it.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's better too. Sometimes you don't want players that have this big personality. You just want them to go out there and do their job. Right. So for me, I kind of like that he has that kind of reserved personality, but when he's out there, he's out there. When it's game time, it is go time. And he is just full throttle and gets the job done. So for me, I kind of appreciate those kind of players that are more on the reserve side, not really big social media presence, but just go in there. They do their job, and they do their job very well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think there is a place in the game for both, but I do think that those old school guys like Jacob deGrom can, I think he kind of handles it the right way, because he doesn't come out there and vilify the guys who handle it a little differently. Because you need to be able to do what works for you, right? Like, you look at a guy like Marcus Stroman, who could not be more different in the way that he goes about his business, but it works for Stroman. He's a he's a lot flashier, but but even just the style of pitcher, he throws much softer than DeGrom does. He's a pitch to contact guy. He's a sinker baller. He throws the cut fastball. He wants you to put the ball in play, but he does it with a swag. He's got the strut, and you don't hear Jacob DeGrom going like, "That's not how you play baseball." He's like, "Hey man, go do you. I'm going to do me over here. You're going to do you over there." Yeah. I think that's the problem sometimes with some of these old school guys is that they want to play police. They want to play baseball police. And I find that to be, kind of boring and unentertaining. And Brian McCann, the catcher for the Braves for all those years, played with the Yankees too. He was that guy. He was always like, you don't showboat like that. And it's like, all right, man, maybe you don't, but like, let the guys play, dude.
Right. Everyone has their own style, their own niche, what they do. So, and I think too, like having an old school mindset, it is hard to change that mindset and to kind of accept like it's okay that everybody's different. Everybody has their own unique style and way of playing the game or doing their thing. Sometimes too, it's kind of like their own gimmick, it's kind of cool to kind of see different players like have their own thing that kind of sets them apart from one another. So I think for like the old school mindset, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes I feel like too, if you care so much about the game and you're very intense, it's really hard to kind of like change that mindset. But I think it's kind of cool that everybody has their own sort of flair when it comes to the game.
Yeah, and it's funny because Trevor Bauer, who was almost the Met and then basically screwed us, but whatever, screw him. Trevor Bauer said something in an interview the other day when he started against the Padres. And so, Tatis hit a home run off of him and showboated it. And then, they asked him about it afterward. And look, Trevor Bauer is the last person that's going to say you can't showboat because he's a flashy player in his own right. But he said, he goes, I love that. I think it's great for the game. If you take me deep, you deserve. He's like, it's hard to get hits. It's hard. This is the highest level of baseball. So if you do something, you should be able to celebrate it. And he's like, because if I do something, I'm going to celebrate it too. And I do think, and I noticed that the game is trending a little bit more in that way, but as they try to grow baseball, I think that's one thing that the old school guys have to sort of forget about this. Like, oh, you just put your head down and everybody has to do it that way. It's like, dude, I say this on every show. I feel like it's not 1968 anymore. It's just not. The world is different. You have to adjust.
Absolutely. And I think that makes the game more exciting too, right? You don't want everybody to be the same old person doing the same old thing. It gets tiresome and boring. After a year of barely having sports, it's just exciting in general just to be able to watch baseball again and to see the fans in the stands again. Like, how exciting is that to be able to finally feel some type of normalcy again? So I feel like especially now, with the pandemic kind of slowly, coming to an end, this is like the perfect time to kind of just break out of your shell and just be uniquely you and to go out there and play the game the way that you want to. Yes, of course, there are rules and you have to follow those certain rules, but in the way you execute it can be in your own style and in your own way.
I totally agree. And it's been quiet in the comments so far, which is fine. But Keith Blacknick, who's behind the scenes here at QBC, he is the man behind it. He says, need some entertainment from the players. And I totally agree. I'm more of a new school guy, but I don't sit here and vilify the old school guys. Like, I don't think it's ridiculous or dumb that a guy like Brandon Nimmo takes a walk and then runs down to first base. I think that's cool. I think that's an old school sentiment. I think he does it well and it works for him. I just don't like when the guys who are old school kind of force that, like that's the only way to play baseball. It's like, look, just because baseball's been around since the 1800s doesn't mean you have to play it that way. You know what I mean? Like, times have changed and you need to modernize it.
Absolutely. Everything evolves over time, So I completely agree. Yeah. And why not spice it up out there on the mound? If you can get a steal in, if you can steal base, do it. That's what the fans want to see. They want to see, the players going out there and entertaining us, as you said. So there needs to be a little more spice and a little more flair, and that's okay to have.
Yeah, and Keith's chiming in again. He said Nimmo shows he plays hard by running to first, and I completely agree. I think but some of these other guys that don't play with that same type of flair. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, right? There is clearly one wrong way, which is like those guys that show just complete lethargy and just don't, they look like they don't care. They seem very apathetic and they never run a ball out. I'm not talking about the guys who, in August, hit a chopper to second base and don't run as hard as they can. Look, everybody's going to do that when you're at game, 120, whatever, you know what I mean? You're going to, okay, I got to save this. I got to save this for the next at bat when I might have to leg out a double or turn a double into a triple, whatever it might be, or beat out a play, when it really matters. I don't mind that as much. I mind the guys who have a complete apathy for the game. But other than that, man, you play the game the way that you want to play it as long as you can back it up, which is funny. That's what Keith just said again. I don't mind a flashy player who talks as long as they can back it up with talent.
Absolutely.
And that's the one thing I will say is that you do kind of put it on yourself. The more flashy you are, you do need to back that up. And right? I mean, Kim, like you saw it kind of firsthand when you're on the sidelines in the NFL. It is easier if you just play the game the right way and just hand off the football, or, after you score a touchdown, you just give it to the ref and you walk away. Or, in this case, you strike a guy out and you put your head down and you walk off the field. That is easier because when you're not doing well, people will still respect it. If you're all flash, it's kind of, it could be a little excessive. But when you were on the sidelines, did you have, like, what was your feeling when you saw that up close and personal? If you saw a guy like Chad Ochocinco or somebody like that kind of go a little nuts, what was your feeling about that?
Oh, it was exciting for us too. I feel like even, if you're on the field, the players, cheerleaders, whatever the case may be, you want to think about, what are the fans watching? Do you want the fans to feel like, oh, okay, this is a good time to go and get a pretzel? Or do you want them to stay in seats? And that's what you have to think about. You want those fans to stay in their seats and watch you the entire time. You don't want them to go up there and get a beer or get a pretzel. No. That's like a waste. You want them to stay in their seats and feel like they're not missing any of the action. With thinking about the Mets, I always think about Jose Reyes when he was in his prime. Like, that to me is somebody who was so flashy and so entertaining on, when he was playing on the mound, on the bases. Like, when he would steal every base he possibly could, I feel like everyone was like on their seats waiting for him to steal a base. So that's what I think about, like, as the flashiest Mets player for me. But that's what you want. You want the fans to stay in their seats. You want them to be excited and on the edge of their seats waiting for you to do your next move.
Yeah, there was nothing more exciting. Reyes in his prime hitting a ball in the gap. You know what I mean? Like at Citi Field, he hit a ball, to the right center field gap where it goes deep, and he can run for days, and it's just like, oh, it's about to be a Reyes triple. I can just feel it, and he flies around the bases, slides head first, pops up, he's clapping his hands, he's going nuts. That was so exciting. Now, obviously, we're going to change gears here in a second, but since we're talking about Flash, I don't mean to put you on the spot with this, but it's a curious question. So, for all the years that you cheered for the Jets, is there a player on the Jets during that time that you would describe as the most flashy? Offense, defense, like, was there somebody who always brought that kind of flash? Because some of those teams, you think about it immediately, especially during the Rex Ryan, they had a lot of swag, but then you're like, they had a lot of guys who just kind of went about their business, the Thomas Joneses of the world. Like, Thomas Jones, not a flashy ball player. So do you have one? And if you need a second to think about it, that's fine. We can always circle back to it.
Honestly, I feel like Brandon Marshall, to me, always stood out because every time he got the ball, ran in for a touchdown, he just always did it with flair. He was always exciting to watch. And just what he was able to do on the field, it was just absolutely incredible. So, like, for me, Brandon Marshall was definitely the flashiest player on the Jets.
Okay. Also, the last, leading, last 1,000-yard receiver we had, which is a long time ago. But anyway, that's something for our other show. So real quick, before we change gears from DeGrom, you mentioned something earlier that I think is really important. You said, I'm so happy that, he's still on the team. We're able to keep him. And he was one of those people that, the Wilpons being notoriously cheap, he was a must-keep ball player, though. He was so good. And it's almost to his credit how crazy good he was is the only reason why he's still on this team. Because I think he was the kind of guy that, if the Mets let him go, fans would, rip the stadium apart.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is that even though he's signed under this big contract, he can opt out after 2022. And if he continues to pitch at this level, he will, not because he wants to leave, but because he wants, he wants more money. He wants to be paid like the best pitcher in the game. So one of the Sport Track put out a tweet a couple days ago, and they said that a pretty good projected number for DeGrom would be 3 years, $108 million tacked on to what he's already got, basically to say goodbye to that opt-out. Is that something that you would entertain as early as now, or would you wait till you got closer to the opt-out, like, perhaps after this season or, even after next season, if he does, look like he's going to opt out? If you ran the Mets, what would you do?
I feel like I would do it at the end of this season, mainly just because I want to see where his head is at, especially now the way that he's already playing. I can just see the trajectory of the remainder of the season can only go up from here. So I would want to check in with him at the end of this season, kind of see where his head's out, and maybe entertain that idea of having him stick around a little bit longer, see if we can increase his deal that he already has with the Mets, just to ensure that this is where he wants to play. I feel like also too, how the Mets do the rest of the season will also factor in, what he wants to do, where he feels his talents are best suited for. So I would want to check in with him at the end of this season, see where his head's at, and just to kind of make sure that the Mets are where it's at for him.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that because, I think there's not this, he is under contract. So there's not this sense of urgency where you have to upset the apple cart by trying to negotiate in the season. But I do think after this season, a full year prior to the opt-out is when you need to address that.
Yeah.
Because when you look at it, it can be complicated when you're dealing with a guy who is the best pitcher in the game or the best player in the game. When you start talking about these guys, that sort of money and those deals can be complicated. But with DeGrom, going back to the kind of player that he is, this kind of unassuming guy, it's almost very straightforward dealing with him, especially because you look at it and you go, look, Jake, you're making, $35 million a year. And what we want to do is we want to tack on some money to that. We'll make sure that you're the highest played pitcher in the game. We can on those New Year's, we can get that number up to whatever it's got to be, 38, 40, whatever it is, and I think that he is simple enough. He is easygoing enough to just go like, that's what I wanted. We're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like he doesn't have that kind of, I feel like, combative personality where he's going to be, challenging too many things. So I kind of do agree too with that, a year before that opt out, just kind of check in and see what you can do. Because the worst thing that could happen is the Mets, snowball out of control, lose it this season, and then he decides to leave because he feels like he's not being used in the right way with the Mets.
Yeah, it's funny because, that always comes up because especially, in some of the bad years they've had where they're just not a good team and he doesn't get the wins and he doesn't get the run support. But it's funny because despite all of that, he's still in this great position, right? Yeah. We still talk about his Hall of Fame candidacy. We still talk about, how he's been dominant. He's been the best pitcher in baseball for the last, 3 years, 3.5 years, really. And I think part of that kind of doesn't affect him anymore. It's like almost like he's so good. Like, look, the Mets squandered a lot of wins for him over the last 3 years, and that sucks. But they haven't scored runs, and he's still been this good, and he's still put up these numbers. He's not going to get to those win thresholds that people think of when they think of Hall of Famers. So I think it almost works to our advantage where he goes like, look, man, even if I went to another team now, like I'm not going to rack up wins like crazy. All I need to do is just keep pitching the way I'm pitching. And I think he's the kind of guy that'll stay here no matter what. Keith Blacknick chiming in again said the Mets need to score runs for DeGrom. That'll keep him with the team, kind of echoing what I just said. But Keith, if you want to throw it in the comments, do you think that if they don't score runs for him, he would leave? Because I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's that cut and dry. And while we wait for him to answer, Kim, what do you think about that? Do you think that really matters for him?
I feel like not right now. It may not matter for him. Like we said, he's kind of not as combative of a personality, but I feel like that could get old pretty quickly down the line. If it's not this year, maybe like going into next year, if the Mets don't do it for him, that can get old pretty quickly. So I feel like not immediate. It's not an immediate factor, but I think it could play into his decision down the line.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, look, I'm sure it's already worn on him because it's been years of this nonsense, but I also think it's more about the team winning than necessarily him getting those win totals. I think if he continues to pitch this way and he continues to, lead the league in ERA, I think if he continues to lead the league in strikeouts and have these great performances and the Mets are successful and maybe he can get a World Series or two, dare I say that as a Mets fan, I think that would go a longer way. I think his competitive spirit needs to be fulfilled more than him actually grabbing, wins as a stat as a starting pitcher. And we'll just go back to Keith because he took a second to answer. I think it'll help with him wanting to stay with his goal for the Hall of Fame. It's going to be the money and show the organization that shows the organization wants to win. And then he followed that up by saying DeGrom is a bulldog. He might not show it on the outside, but inside he's such a bulldog. We actually talked about that earlier, how he's a non-assuming kind of guy, but he really, really wants to rip your guts out when he's pitching. So all right, we've talked a ton about DeGrom, so we'll just change gears for a second. We just had a really good series against the Nationals. Obviously, that DeGrom start on Friday, it was electric. We wound up winning, the rubber match on Sunday, and then it was a little bit of a clunker in the middle. That was the first, misstep we've seen from Marcus Stroman. So, but it was also a little bit more of the Marcus Stroman we saw 2 years ago when we first got him. And it's been a little bit more of what Stroman has been over his career. So does that make you think that maybe the first three starts we saw was a little bit of a fluke? Or like, how do you feel about that middle game that we watched? Because it wasn't good by any standards across the board for the whole team.
Exactly. I feel like, yes, he's part of to blame. I don't think it was a fluke. I just think he had a really bad game, but also the defense on a whole was just horrendous right off the bat. Like Conforto completely missing that catch right off the bat, first batter up. Like you can't make those stupid mistakes because it kind of sets the tone for the whole rest of the game. So I think it's a combination of he didn't pitch his best game. That's clear. But also, too, the defense needs to step it up. And I feel like that's been a constant problem with the Mets. It's the defense. They don't know how to tighten up. And they have their shining moments, which happened the other two games. I thought yesterday's game, the defense was on point. I thought they did a very clean – they had a clean game. But Saturday, it's like watching – it's like, oh, here come the Mets. They're doing what they always do best, just completely being sloppy. So I feel like – Stroman is part to blame, but it's also the defense was just absolutely horrendous on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the story of the season so far. And a little bit of that you can blame on some of the weather and some of the not getting the reps, right? Because not only did they have these games canceled, but with that, they've had, they've had to go and play in places like Colorado where they're not going to go out and take early infield. I understand these guys are professionals and that's not going to make or break what they do. But when you look at the way, like they're not going to go out and take extra BP. They're not going to go out and take extra infield when it's 32 degrees outside. No one's going to do that. And when you factor in like, oh, also, by the way, they missed 7 games to start the season because of, cancellations and postponements and rescheduling and all this stuff. I think that they haven't found their rhythm. Now, I don't think this is a good defensive team. I think they're a better defensive team than they've been the last 3, 4, 5 years, but they're not a good defensive team. But they showed yesterday, to your point, how good they can be in certain spots. Almora is a stud out in center field. He can really go get it. Alonso has committed to being a better defensive first baseman, and he's shown that. Dom has been better in left field. But some of the things, some of the players really kind of irk me because then you've got guys like McNeil, who should be better, who's been a little clunky. Conforto, who should be better, who's been a little clunky. And when you have J.D. Davis playing third, and Nimmo out of position in center, and Dom out of position in left, you can't afford guys like McNeil and Conforto who are supposed to be, average to above average to, in some cases, plus defenders. You can't have them be shitty. You can't afford it.
Exactly. And I feel like to our point we spoke about earlier on in the episode, like you're in the major leagues. You're in Major League Baseball now. Like you can't be making that kind of stupid mistakes. And that's like to your point, McNeil and Conforto, what are you doing? Like we expect these players to be at their absolute best. And when they are at their best, they're incredible. But what they showed on Saturday is just lack of, discipline, really, and I don't know how they're going to need to figure out a way to get the discipline of the defense up and running. Because I feel like once they solve that problem, they'll be able to win more and more games and stay in the lead in the AL East. Actually, I'm sorry, the NL East.
Yeah. It has been a sort of an outstanding problem, like we said, and it goes along with some of the other things that have been outstanding problems all season, going back to last year too, not hitting with runners in scoring position and not hitting for enough power. No, there hasn't been a lot of timely power. I'm going to jump back into the comments with Keith. He's been real active here. He said the Mets should have walked out of Chicago with a trade for Chris Bryant. I completely agree. I have been on the Mets getting Chris Bryant bandwagon since the beginning of the offseason. I like J.D. Davis as a player. I think he's a good hitter. He can be a great hitter, but I think he is an absolute butcher in the field. And he scares me in a big spot. And look, as competitive as the team can be, we saw it when we got to the World Series in 15. Defense killed us. Cespedes booted that ball on the first play of the game in game 1. Lucas Duda had that bad throw home that killed us. We had to play the entire series with Wilmer Flores at shortstop. I don't want this team to, get deep into the playoffs, which they're capable of doing, and then losing on a J.D. Davis throwing error. We've seen that movie before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just the thing. I feel like here in baseball, you really need to be a well-rounded player. You need to be able to hit the ball. You need to be able to play the defense, play the offense as well as you possibly can. And I feel like we can't afford to have that kind of sloppiness, especially now that we're progressing on into the season. And now that there's talks that potentially the Mets could actually be in the postseason, you can't afford any kind of errors like that. And that's like, someone like J.D. Davis, needs to kind of – I feel like when he goes out there, it makes me a little bit nervous because I feel like he's so inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get when he's out there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And it's to the point that the thing that I've been saying, because I got a lot of flack on Twitter, especially for this, when I was talking about moving on from J.D. Davis. They're like, you don't know, he's going to hit, he's going to do this. And I'm like, he is going to hit. But there's a certain loser mentality that a lot of Met fans are victim of because of who our owners used to be. J.D. Davis is not a starting third baseman on a team that has World Series aspirations. He's not good enough on that side of the ball. Is J.D. Davis a major league hitter that is a legitimate power threat and a legitimate RBI bat? Since he's come to the Mets, by and large, yes, that's what he has shown. But this guy cannot start at third base every day if you have championship aspirations. And that's been my beef. It's not that I don't like J.D. Davis. I actually met J.D. Davis at batting practice once. The guy's got a great sense of humor. He works hard. I just don't think that he is good enough on a team that has real deal aspirations. Back into the comments real quick. Conforto is so in his own head right now. McNeil is due for a rough few games after being very good for the last few seasons. That's true. I think the Conforto non-contract extension and then starting off slow, I think that's been really playing in his head. And it is true. McNeil has been absolutely a beast since we called him up. And so I think that'll happen, and it's not a huge problem. And then somebody that we both know, Kim, who's joining in, it's I don't like the comment, but we're gonna pull him up here. Tavian Ferguson, T, as we know him, saying "Go Dodgers!" LOL. T, we love you, but screw you, man.
I think I hear my heart breaking in the distance, T. But miss you, love you, hope you're well.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic dude. Obviously, an LA native where I live now, but I don't need to hear more about the Dodgers because it's been a lot of Dodgers.
And everywhere I turn, everyone's like, "Oh, but can the Mets beat the Dodgers?" I don't think so. It's like, yes, I know it's only April, and I know that we have this like, it's April is when the Mets do great, and then it's June after it's like always after the All-Star break when like it kind of starts to spiral out of control for the Mets. But my hope for the Mets is that they just continue on a positive track, and after the All-Star break, everything is still fine in the world of baseball.
It would be nice to put together a full, complete season for the Mets. T saying LMAO about what we said, and he said, miss you guys. So the sentiment is there. Miss you too, man. No, it's true because we have not put together one of those seasons since probably 2006. I mean, 2006, we were the best team in baseball, certainly the best team in the National League all season. Went through the playoffs, should have beat the Cardinals. We didn't. Didn't make the World Series. It is what it is. But
Right.
that was the last complete season that the Mets have put together, because even in some other years, it's been the heartbreak. Forget about the collapses in 2007. Forget about all that stuff. There's been these seasons that blow your mind. A couple of years ago, the Mets make the playoffs if they don't have statistically the worst May in the history of Major League Baseball, where they lost like 25 games in the month. If they just play average, they make the playoffs that year. If they play mediocre that month, they were good after that. But I'm tired of that from the Mets. And I do think the ownership, I think the Steve Cohen Mets aren't going to be those kind of Mets, because I do think that he's the guy that will empower the baseball people to go out and get better. He will say, hey, who do we need to get over the hump? Whether it's at the trade deadline, whether it's in the offseason, he's the kind of guy that you're going to allow the baseball people to really tinker with the team if the team is good. And in past years, it's always been a problem for us. Look, they went out and got Cespedes and Kelly Johnson and Uribe on the run in 2015, but they had to. They needed to go address that, and they did. But there's been other years where we're kind of sort of good enough. Maybe good enough. And the Wilpons are like, but don't you know David Wright's coming back? That's our big trade deadline pickup. It's like, no, dude, David Wright can barely stand up. That's not our big acquisition. We need to be better protected than that. So, I think now with Cohen running the team, I have a new confidence where it's like, look, if the Mets need a reliever in July, they're going to go get one. And they're not going to get some scrub. They're going to go get somebody who's been dominant. They'll take on money, which they never did. They will make the kind of moves that a team in New York should make.
Exactly. And I think that fans are ready for that now. We're ready to have a team that can take us to the next level. Like you said, I'm tired of just being good, then all of a sudden, it just crumbles for us. And then it's just the same old Mets all over again. We've had those moments where we've had amazing seasons. And I know that fans, including myself, are ready, now that we're truly back at baseball, to have the Mets flourish and to do what they need to do, no matter what the cost is, to go out there and be a World Series team. Because I think we can do it as long as we have the right players, the right management, and we're the right technique. I think with all those combinations combined, we could be unstoppable.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing. We talked about this on the show before, where the Mets have fallen short is not necessarily on the field in some instances. Yes, you want to be able to go out and trade pennies on the dollar to get a guy like Lindor that Cleveland can't pay and say, you know what, we're going to pay you. That's big market move. Yes, that's the one that people look at and they go, wow, it's Steve Cohen. He has arrived and he's going to give out a huge contract. That is important. That matters. You want to be able to extend a guy like DeGrom. That matters. Even a guy like Conforto, if he's the guy you want to keep. You want to extend the guys that you developed. All of that matters. But it's also where the money goes in places that fans don't see every single day. The Mets had one of the smallest, most pathetic analytics departments in terms of player evaluation in baseball. And as soon as Alderson got back here, as soon as Steve Cohen took over, they were like, we're infusing a ton of money into our scouting and our development and our analytics. And it's like, that's what you need to do to win. Is it the entire catch-all? No, but it's a part of winning. That's how the Rays managed to be competitive, even though they don't have a huge payroll. It's how the A's managed to be competitive for the same reason. But you know what? It's also how the Dodgers managed to be so competitive, even though they have the most money in the game.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's from that business perspective, and now having Cohen as the owner, I think it's a different approach now to the New York Mets. I think he's going to be able to take risks and do what's best for the team, which in the long run is going to make the situation just so much better. I feel like just in the past, there's been decisions made for the Mets that either was the cheap way out or wasn't in the best interest for the organization. And I feel like now I agree, and I do too have confidence that the Mets are already moving in the right direction and they have nowhere but up to go from here.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about a bunch. I've just either since I've been doing this show or just with other Met fans, some people will say like, the Mets spent money, the Mets did this. And it's like, yeah, but to your point, it was always the cheap option or the cheaper option.
Yes.
It was the show gesture of like, look, guys, see, we're doing something. See it?
Exactly.
We're doing it. Or they would show it, rather they'd show it to you this way, but it was paper thin. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It would always be like, well, we made an offer to Vladimir Guerrero, and it was like, yeah, but you made him an offer that was, 30 million less than what he got. So like, what you knew you weren't going to get him. Like, you weren't in the ballpark. You weren't being competitive in that pursuit. So that's the other thing that annoyed me in the offseason when people were like, oh, the Mets didn't go out and get George Springer. They didn't go out and get Bauer. They didn't go out and get Real Muto. Well, you know what? They made an offer to Springer that was representative. Toronto wound up giving him another year. The Mets didn't want to go to that other year. That's fine. That's going to happen. They made an offer to Realmuto early, and he didn't want to sign then because he thought he would get more money if he waited. But they made him a representative offer. They made Bauer an offer that was bigger than what the Dodgers wound up paying him. And he used that offer as leverage to get the money he wanted from the Dodgers. So those aren't the misses that the Wilpon Mets used to have. The Wilpon Mets would go, oh, what does Matt Holliday want? Oh, $150 million. We're going to sign Jason Bay for 40.
Right. What?
It was like, oh, look, we signed Jason Bay. And it's like, well, yeah, Jason Bay turned out to be one of the worst signings in the history of Major League Baseball. Right. And Matt Holliday went on to have 5 above average, really good years with the Cardinals. And then 2 at the end where he was old and he was still pretty good. But they were always like, well, we did this. We didn't do this, but we did something.
And like, clearly, like, history shows that when you have that kind of mentality, like, you're not going to get the job done. You're going to get what you pay for, right? As the saying goes. So you go with the cheaper option, the team's going to come out not as good. But now I feel like we're going to make those trades. If we need to make a trade, boom, it's going to happen. If we need to pick up a player, we're going to spend the money and we're going to do whatever it takes to get the Mets at the next level because we have it. The talent is there. We just need to fine tune it a little bit and be able to take those risks to be able to bring us to the next level.
Keith makes another great point, and this is something I actually opened the show with. I think it was the second show I ever did. My rant was about Jed Lowry, and he said, Mets spent money but not wisely, or spent money on a player who got hurt and then tell him to not get surgery. So a couple weeks ago, I was like, look, Jed Lowry couldn't stand up for us for 2 years. We gave him $20 million. The guy had 7 at-bats. His legs didn't work. He was in a full body cast. I said, now he not only makes the A's, but he's batting third. He's playing second base every day. And I was like, we need an explanation. Brody Van Wagenen's not here anymore. The Wilpons aren't here anymore. Lowry's not here anymore. Somebody who was involved in this process needs to come out and say what the hell happened, because to Met fans, it's really unfair. It looks like this guy dogged us, and I'm sure Jed Lowry wanted to play baseball. So I was like, Met fans are blaming him, but I don't think it's him. And then sure enough, he came out and said, hey, look, I needed to get this surgery, but Jeff Wilpon basically told me, like, you can't get it because it's going to look bad. And we would not have had Jed Lowry the way it worked out, right? Because of the shortened season, he would have gotten the surgery. More than likely, we wouldn't have had him play for us anyway. But at least we would have known what was happening. To not allow him to go and get surgery, or the same thing happened with Beltran. They didn't want Beltran to get the surgery because it would look bad. It's like, God, you invested in the guy. Let the guy do what he's got to do to go be healthy and play baseball.
Exactly. Like, these are athletes. Like, any athlete, no matter what sport you're playing, you use your bodies. Like, your job is to use your body, and to not allow somebody that knows they need surgery to not get surgery, to fix their body so they can do their job effectively, is so wrong on so many levels. I know personally, I had ACL surgery on my knee when I was a freshman in college, tore my ACL meniscus. If I wasn't allowed to get surgery, I probably would never have been a flight crew cheerleader. I never would have been allowed to dance again. So to not allow a player to get surgery to fix their body, which allows them to do their job because it looks bad, is the most ridiculous excuse I've ever heard in my entire life.
Well, and it's first of all, on the surface, it's absolutely absurd. And I was just thinking about this too, and specifically with the Lowry situation, right? Now, if he gets the surgery, right, there's a chances the Mets are out from under his contract anyway because he doesn't play and the 2 years are up, whatever. But I just feel like the Steve Cohen Mets, if Steve Cohen owned the team back then, would have been like, look, okay, here's the thing. we gave you the 20 million. Okay. You obviously you got hurt and that's unfortunate. We want you to get the surgery. We want you to get back healthy. I almost feel as though, there's a consultation you can have with your team doctor and his doctor and say, look, if he gets this surgery, what kind of shape would he be in? And the 2021 Mets didn't need Jed Lowry on their team, but I just feel like there would be there'd be a powwow had there. And it's like, hey, look, what we want to do is we want to extend your contract by 1 year, but we don't want to give you, the same money you were making, but we want you to feel secure, right? If you go into the offseason having not played in 2 years, you're probably going to get a minor league deal and there's no guarantees, which is what he got. And to his credit, he made the A's, right? So I feel like they would have said something like, look, we want to sign you to, $2 million for 1 year. And it's guaranteed. It's a major league deal. We want you to rehab with the Mets. We want to see what you can do next year if you can come back healthy. And, on your side, you kind of like, in a way, owe it to us because we gave you $20 million for 2 years to not play. And I feel like that's the kind of investment that a guy like Cohen would make. That's the kind of, smart decision a guy would say, like, look, okay, we want this to work out for both sides. And how can we figure that out? Rather than Jeff Wilpon going, well, the Mets have bad reputation with players getting injured. So we'd rather you just not get the surgery.
Yeah. Like what? Exactly. And to your point, these players are an investment. And I think that's the best way to word it, really. When you're bringing on players onto a team, they really are an investment. And you have to think about what is the best investment on both sides. And that's why I'm thrilled that Steve Cohen is our owner now. I feel like under his regime, it's going to be a different type of organization. And it's going to be done the right way, not like half-assing anything, not finding the cheaper version to do things. It's going to be done the right way.
Exactly. And, everybody has said that, no matter what sport you're in, the players are the investment. You make the investment and you have to carry it out. You have to see it through. But you have to protect that investment, to your point. Yeah. And protecting that investment, it means a lot of different things when you're talking about a person and a player's body. And, and that's why I just look, would that situation with Jed Lowry have played out the way that I described it? Probably not, because the Mets would have been like, whew, you know what? We need to move on from this guy. He can't stand up. He's going to be, 36, 37 years old, whatever. We're moving on from him. Fine. We're happy to get out from under this. But I just feel like there's a creativity that was lacking. There was a lack of urgency. There was just a real lack of know-how around the organization that was so frustrating. Absolutely. So let's change gears from that, because it's the Mets are in first place, right? And talk a little bit about just kind of where they've been so far, where they're going. So we talked about a couple of things that were problematic, and we've talked about a couple of things that are good. So I just want to ask you as a fan, it's early, still super early, but what do you think has been the most impressive thing that they've done so far? And what do you think has been the most, I don't want to say disappointing, but the thing that you think might be the most problematic? Like, for instance, we've talked about how the defense is real bad. Is it that? Is it something else?
I think for the Mets, the best thing is that they're playing baseball and they're playing it well. And,
just playing baseball is great right now.
Exactly. But I think just having powerhouses like DeGrom, Nimmo, I'm really impressed with Nimmo this year. When he's good, he is great. Even Friday had his first home run of the season. Amazing. So I think just having those key players and having them excel at the right moments, that's been really great for the Mets. I think the biggest, I wouldn't say disappointment, but I think the biggest issue the Mets are having is that they're all in their own heads. Like they basically, my advice to them is don't beat yourself. Don't try to beat yourself in the game, because I feel like that's what they've been doing, up against the Nationals on Saturday. They're freaking out too much and it's affecting their game. So I feel like if they can all kind of just, if something bad happens, if another team takes over the lead, they need to get out of their heads and just continue to play the game and just say, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's move forward and let's figure out how we can overcome and be in the lead. So I think for the Mets, they just need to tighten up technically. They need to tighten up, in terms of the defense. And they just need to get out of their own heads and get out of their own way and just play baseball and just do what they need to do each step of the way to overcome those adversities.
That's actually a really good way of putting it. I didn't think about it like that because
Yeah.
I kind of like wanted to pose that question to you, and as I was coming up with that before we went on, I was like,
Mhm.
what would my thing be? Is it and the two that I kept going back to was either the defense or hitting with runners in scoring position that they haven't
Yeah.
really done. And I looked at those two things and I'm like, it's so hard to decide. But I think the
Yeah.
way that you put it is 100% right, and it's just hey, Mets, don't compound things.
Right.
Don't pile on. If somebody makes an error, pick the next guy up. Don't let that spiral. If it's a runner on third base and nobody out and the first guy pops up, well, you know what? You can still get that runner in without a hit if you hit the ball, deep enough to the middle infielders, or if you hit a sac fly, the next guy can do it. Don't compound things. And I think that's, get out of your own head is a really good way of putting it, because it can be, it's not simple. It's Major League Baseball, but it can be that simple in terms of affecting both the defense and the fact that they're not hitting with runners in scoring position, because all of that has to do with just not performing in the clutch, not performing when the team needs it the most.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like those pressure moments, right? It's like when you're under pressure and you know you have to get the job done, just do it, right? Get out of your own way, get out of your own head. Like, yeah, there are going to be times where you may not be in the lead. There are going to be times where you had the lead and then you lost it. It's how are you going to recover from that? How are you going to rebound from that and come out on top no matter what? So I think that's something that the Mets need to work on and continue to work on as the season progresses, because I feel like that's when they lose it. They start off strong, and as we said before, after that all-star break, it starts to spiral. They need to be able to maintain playing great baseball offensively and defensively and be able to carry that out throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I really do. So we got about 5-ish minutes left before I'll let you go. So the one thing we haven't talked about on the agenda is the upcoming series. Starts tomorrow. It's a quick
Yes.
2-game set with the Boston Red Sox.
Mhm.
A bit of a surprising team, like I alluded to earlier. Boston hasn't really been trying to win the last couple of years, and it has to do with the luxury tax, and I hate that. We don't really have time to get into that part of it. That's another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
They need to rework that in the offseason when they do the collective bargaining agreement. But for right now, the Red Sox, for a team that a lot of people said, look, they traded away all their talent. They let go of Mookie Betts and Andrew Benintendi, and they let, to a lesser extent, Jackie Bradley Jr. walk, and all these guys go. They're 14-9.
Yeah.
They're in first place.
There are.
I don't think anybody expected that.
No.
I'm going to ask you a real straightforward question. Do you think they're that good? Or do you think it's just been...
No, this is my thing. When it comes to the Red Sox, I always refer to them as like the big bad wolf in the MLB. Like, they're just like, they're always there. They're a nuisance. Like, just everybody hates them, right? Like, but like this will be a really good series to see, like, the leaders of the AL East versus the leaders of the NL East. Like, who is, the top dog of the East, basically. But yeah. I think this 14-9 is a fluke, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, how did they get there? And again, we have DeGrom on Wednesday. Thank God. So I feel like that will help a lot. But no, I think if the Mets are smart, and like we said before, they get out of their own way, they get out of their own head, they play strategic baseball, they can win this series.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, especially coming off of the 60-game season, look, April's always tricky, right? You have great teams start off terribly. You have, bad teams start off great. It just happens because it happens on an individual basis, right? You see, great players that, bat 150 for the month of April, and then you have guys you've never heard of, 28-year-old rookies batting 500, right? So that's how baseball is. It's how baseball has always been. But I think coming off of a season, no one knows how to gauge with the 60 games. Look, the Dodgers were legit. They won the World Series. That's a legit championship. But the rest of the season is very unrepresentative of what a baseball season is. And so I think it's even harder to judge April right now. But I think the proof is in the pudding. The Red Sox you look at their roster top to bottom, you look at their pitching staff, it's not good, so it's not sustainable. Right. And here's the thing, though, from a Mets perspective, I don't think it matters because right now, today, to your point, you've got two first place teams going up against each other. And so what the Mets can take away, or the Mets fans can take away from this series, is the Mets are playing a team that right now is playing really well. And in that sense, it's measurable. Other than that, it's not measurable. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I feel like, then yes, I know that right now the Red Sox are the highest scoring team in baseball. But like, again, it's April. It's so early on. It's like so hard to judge. It's like, really? The Red Sox? But also the Yankees are in last place. And like, we know how that always works out too for us Met fans, right? So I just feel like the Mets are good enough and they can win this series. I really do feel that way. They just got to be smart about it. They have to play smart, go up against the big bad wolf, and hopefully Little Red Riding Hood gets to be able to go home at the end of the day.
No, I agree with that point. And then one thing is, with it being a 2-game set, the Mets don't even necessarily have to win. You can't really win the series. So you have to either sweep it or split it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So from that perspective, with DeGrom going against a guy like Nick Pivetta, who's had a good start to his season, but obviously advantage Mets, all the Mets have to do is try to sneak away with a win tomorrow.
That's it.
And then all of a sudden you've swept the quick series. You got another off day Thursday, which is ludicrous, but you swept the series, and now you could look towards the weekend and try to build off that momentum. Yeah. But the Mets need to take care of business, especially look, Garrett Richards is pitching tomorrow. He's historically a good pitcher, but not a great pitcher, but a good pitcher. Has good seasons. But right now, this year, he is 0-2. He's got a 6.50 ERA. The guy, you need to take advantage of a guy like that, especially going up against Peterson. Peterson has been up and down this year so far, but I think that this is advantage Mets. And so if you look at the pitching matchup, the Mets should get out of this series with Boston with 2 wins. And they need to play the best way that they can. They need to play their game. If the Mets, forget about the lights out game on Friday night. If the Mets play like they did on Sunday, they'll win both of these games.
I agree. 1,000%. Like we said, they just got to be smart, right? The defense needs to be on point. The defense needs to show up and be able to protect the pitchers. If for some reason, there's a fly ball or they're able to hit the ball, the defense has to be there. They have to be able to prevent any runs from coming in, So I feel like if the Mets can do that, I agree. This should be an easy 2-game win. No problem here.
I agree. I think if the Mets play there, I think this is a case of the Mets beating themselves playing Boston. I think the Mets are a better team on paper. And if the Mets play like they played on Saturday, or if they play like that game that they played in Chicago, I mean, look, those 2 games, the Mets looked like they might be the worst team in baseball on those 2 games, right? Like they weren't hitting. They couldn't hit in the clutch. Forget about that. But they weren't hitting at all. They couldn't play defense at all. They looked horrendous. They don't have to play like the best team in baseball. They just can't play like the worst. If they play like the worst, they're going to get their asses beat by Boston. But if they play near what they're capable of, I think they're a much better team than Boston. I wasn't going to bring this up, but Keith makes a good point in the comments. He said with Bumgarner, with the not really a no-hitter the other night, he threw that 7-inning no-hitter. Would Met fans explode if that happens to DeGrom? What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I'm like waiting for DeGrom to throw a no-hitter here. But then, if you bounce it off somebody's foot, I mean, like, I would blame the batter. I would freak out. But I think we would absolutely explode, right? That's something I think all Met fans want to be able to see and witness.
Yeah, I think what's crazy about the Bumgarner no-hitter is it not a no-hitter with the 7-inning rule and all that stuff. I think the reason why Met fans would lose it, the reason why I would lose it is because the only no-hitter we have is Johans, and that was tainted in some people's minds because there was a bad call. Like, there's never been a bad call in the history of baseball, but that one screws us, so it's not a real no-hitter. So if DeGrom was to throw a 7-inning no-hitter, that would be more of the rhetoric. It's like, oh, the Mets don't really have a no-hitter. They don't really have a no-hitter. They don't, and it's just like, as a Met fan, like we are both also Jets fans, I'm just tired of being the punchline when we don't deserve it. Because the Mets, like the Jets, have done plenty to be the punchline.
Yes.
But I don't want to hear it in places where it doesn't apply. Look, did Beltran hit the ball fair and technically that's not a no-hitter? Well, yeah, look, it was a fair ball. It was a blown call, but it was called foul, and then there were no hits given up. So that is a no-hitter, is a no-hitter, is a no-hitter forever. Exactly. I don't want to be the butt of the joke anymore.
No, I completely agree with you. I think, like, for me too, I'm like so tired of like, you know, hearing it's the same old Jets, the same old Mets, you know. So I feel like right now the Mets are in a great direction. Again, it's just like those minor details that they just need to tighten up and fix. But I feel like if they can do that, the Mets are going to be unstoppable. I'm saying it right now. The Mets will be in postseason. Mark my words.
I think so. And I know that a lot of the projections, you know, the Vegas odds and all that stuff had them, as a few of them had the Mets winning, you know, the East. And a lot of people looked at it and were like, that's kind of crazy. What about the Braves? They had the Braves taking a real step back. And look, I think the best thing about the Mets right now is that they have not played near their best baseball as a team. As on an individual level, outside of DeGrom and Stroman up until the last start and Nimmo, the team has been really middling. Alonso's come on lately. He's hit for a lot of power. He's played really good defense, so I don't want to discredit him. But even him earlier on, you know, and J.D. Davis, when he's healthy, is hit. But the team has not been firing on all cylinders in any way, shape, or form. And yet they're just above 500. And they are, you know, they have the best starting pitching ERA in baseball, and they're in first place. So if this team ever even kind of puts it together where they're playing consistently good defense and they're hitting, you know, they don't even have to turn it around and be great with runners in scoring position. They just have to not be awful.
Yes.
How good could they be if some of these things improve to just mediocrity?
Right. And that's all it takes, right? They're already, like, right now, everything is set up for the Mets, right? They're in a great position right now, but they need to just keep it consistent. It's just staying consistent. And for the players, they need to be well-rounded. Like, as you said, on all cylinders, it's the offense, it's the defense, it's every which way that you look at it. If they maintain that consistency, they can take it all the way, possibly even to the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to try to go through the Dodgers, that I will say. I mean, the Dodgers look like they're otherworldly team right now. But again, you know, you never know. You never know what can happen. And, you know, I'll bank on the team that's got the best pitcher in baseball. Like, you know, I'll bank on that. Let's get there first, but, you know, I will bank on that. Kim, thank you so much for doing this show. I hope that you had a lot of fun. I know that we went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I hope that was okay.
No, thank you so much for having me. Anytime I can talk about the Mets is a treat. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Do you have anything coming up that you want to plug? Because after the live stream, this goes on the QBC YouTube channel, so people can watch it after the fact. You have anything coming up that you want to plug, or just your social handles, anything like that?
I'm always doing something, so I think the best bet for you guys is just to stay up to date with me on all of my social media platforms at Kimberly Cantoni. That's for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also get my website is www.kimberlycantoni.com, and just stay up to date with me because I'm always doing something different every single day.
That's absolutely true, Kim. Thank you so much. And as a matter of fact, this is not the only live stream that you and I are doing today. In a little bit, we're going to be doing some double duty in just a few hours. Kim, myself, and our third co-host of the Goddamn Jets, Max Antonucci, are going to be joining a phenomenal podcaster and a great Jets fan, Green Bean the Jets fan, over on his live stream. We're going to be doing a full mock draft. We're going to be live for like 2 hours. It's going to be absolutely insane. I am looking forward to it. So, Kim, I'm going to let you go, finish getting ready for that, and rest your voice a little bit. And I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Later, Kim. That is Kimberly Cantoni, host personality, Monster Jam announcer, former Jets Flight Crew Cheerleader, my co-host. She's a dear friend. Guys, thank you for watching. A little quiet in the comments today. I know sometimes on Mets off days, which is my favorite time to do the show because we're not limited, but I know that sometimes, people are a little bit more distant on those days, but it's all good. Appreciate everybody who threw stuff into the comments. This has been Catching Feelings. I'm your host, John Sapanaro, and we will see you again in just a couple days. I'm going to go live with my buddy, Mark Anthony Ramirez. He's a great comic, another huge Mets fan, super knowledgeable. He's always active on the Mets Twitter and all the message boards and stuff like that. So I will see you guys then. Thank you very much. This has been Catching Feelings. Peace.